Hi, everybody. My name is Francesca Rossi. I work at IBM Research. I'm the company global leader for responsible AI and AI governance, and I'm also the past president of AAAI. And I would like to welcome you all to this AAAI panel discussion on AI, factuality, and trustworthiness. But before we get to the discussion, let me start by saying that, as we all know, AI capabilities and research are really undergoing a fast and very significant transformation along many dimensions, including its topics, methods, research community, the working environment. And in this rapidly evolving scenario, it is important to be able to clearly identify the trajectory of AI capabilities and AI research and the challenges still ahead of us to make AI more capable, but also reliable and safe. To contribute to this goal, in March 2025, AAAI published a report on the future of AI research, which summarizes the finding of a study of several months on significant AI research trends. The study was led by me as the then current AAAI president and conducted together with 25 prominent AI researchers and supported also by a community survey with almost 500 respondents. Topics covered in the report include who is doing AI research, what new topics in AI is AI research about, and how AI research is conducted, and also mentions the geopolitical scenarios around AI. The report, which can be found on the AAAI website, identified in total 17 topics, and for each of them, the report includes a chapter that sketches its history, current trends, and open challenges. The report has been intentionally written in a non-technical way to reach out to many audiences, including experts of other disciplines, policymakers, funding agencies, the media, and the general public. To go deeper into each one of these topics, AAAI already held in-depth panel discussions on 5 of the 17 topics: AGI, AI perception versus reality, AI reasoning, AI and sustainability, and AI agents. And today we will discuss another one of these 17 topics, AI, factuality, and trustworthiness. So an AI system is factual if it refrains from outputting false statements, the so-called hallucinations. And of course, it's difficult to trust an AI system if it can be non-factual. However, trustworthiness extends factuality to include other criteria such as human understandability, robustness, and the alignment with human values. According to many company executives, lack of trustworthiness is one of the main obstacles to adopting AI at scale in their organization, especially in critical application. So improving the factuality and trustworthiness of AI system is arguably the largest area of AI research today. Indeed, over 75% of the respondents to our survey strongly agreed that factuality and trustworthiness were relevant or very relevant to their own research. We will discuss both these topics and much more with the following panelists. Oren Etzioni, founder of TrueMedia.org and professor emeritus at the University of Washington. Henry Kautz, hi Oren. Henry Kautz, professor of computer science at the University of Virginia and Charlottesville. Hi Henry. And Kush Varshney, IBM fellow and co-director of the IBM Science for Social Good program. Hi Kush. Before we start with the questions, let me remind everybody that you can write your own questions in the chat window of this call, and we will try to incorporate in the discussion some of the questions if there is time. So let's start from defining factuality and trustworthiness. So Oren, I will start from you. How would you define factuality in AI, and what does it have to do with hallucinations and deepfakes?
I think that the definition you shared is accurate, and I think that the key point is that we come to expect certain principles when we interact with computer systems, when we interact with people, that they can be trustworthy, they can be reliable. When you ask what is the capital of France, and you hear Paris, that's a fact. When you see a citation to a resource, okay, the population of Poland is this number based on this survey, that citation is accurate. These are just kind of basic things that we, as non-experts in AI, tend to assume. And the problem is that, and this has been documented, there are famous cases, lawyers submitting briefs, right, that contain these hallucinations or erroneous citations. Those sorts of things are notorious. And the issue is that we have systems that don't have them. So, sorry, I'm going a bit beyond the question, right? But you define factuality. Basically, factuality is you get what you expect in objective terms. And the issue that we're here to discuss is, at least in recent times, our AI systems fail to deliver that.
Thank you, Oren. Kush, Henry, do you want to add anything to this topic?
Yeah,
I think
go ahead, Henry.
I was just going to say that in that first question about hallucination and deep fakes, we can think of deep fakes as the user intends to deceive, and hallucination problem is the system unwittingly deceives itself.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and
Kush.
something I was going to add, and I think we'll get into it a lot later, is I mean, there can be different truths, different facts, different versions of kind of what people believe. So, I mean, objective is also kind of a strange word sometimes, but yeah, I think we'll get into it as we go along.
Okay. Yes. So then from factuality, let's go to trustworthiness. So, Kush, what does it mean to trust an AI system? What properties should this system have to be trusted beyond even factuality?
Yeah, so I mean, Oren kind of started saying this also, which is, I mean, humans can be trustworthy, AI systems can be trustworthy in different fashions, but at the end of the day, I think they're kind of more or less the same. And the way I like to explain it is like, think about if you're gonna hire a carpenter to work on your house, like what makes that other person trustworthy? And there are kind of these different attributes. One is that they're competent at what they're doing. I mean, they're doing what they say they're going to do, but they're also reliable. They kind of are able to keep that competence in different settings, different conditions, and so forth. Also, that you can communicate back and forth with the other person. They understand you, you understand them, and so forth. And then they're kind of selfless, so they're working for your goals rather than for their own goals. And all of these, I mean, completely translate over to AI systems. And when we're talking about traditional machine learning sort of things, the general competence becomes things like accuracy. When it's the reliability, it becomes kind of robustness, both adversarial and kind of general robustness, but also fairness, so that things work for different people, different sort of groups, individuals, and so forth. And then kind of explainability and kind of, yeah, I mean, these sort of things all kind of become part of it.
Henry, Oren? Anything about trustworthiness? Any other property?
Well, I think one aspect of trustworthiness is that it's essentially it's in the head of the user, right? And well, actually, it's a combination. A user can trust a system, so that's part of trustworthiness. At the same time, the system might be not trustworthy, so not worthy of trust. So the system both has to be worthy of trust and inspire trust. And you can come up with examples that go each way, where a system is very trustworthy, but people still don't trust it. And that's an issue with, for example, even early work on medical expert systems for specific domains like bacterial infection, where the system was very trustworthy, but it did not inspire trust.
And I think it can happen also the opposite, that the system is perceived as being trustworthy, but maybe is less so, and people tend to
Exactly.
over rely, over delegate, over trust, right?
Right. And when you think of, why do we trust a person, is they've not only, let's say, done good work for us in the past, but they can explain, why they're making the decisions they're making. And so that's why then this notion of trustworthiness includes explanation. Of course, you can have an untrustworthy system that comes up with bogus explanations. So it's kind of a recursive process there.
Yeah. So Henry, but then Kush also mentioned robustness. So in your view, what is AI robustness and how does it relate to trustworthiness of AI?
So I look at robustness as sort of the opposite of fragility. And we think of an AI system as fragility when it fails catastrophically once it's operating outside of its intended parameters. So a system is robust both if, let's say, part of it is breadth, not being quite so narrowly focused, but a large part of it is also simply being able to recognize when it's out of its depth and it can come back. So you might have a robust, imagine a system that can give you advice about cancer, and a robust version might say if you're asking questions about things that don't involve cancer, then it tells you, you're out of my area of expertise, where a non-robust system just starts to diagnose you with every kind of cancer in the world because nothing relates your symptoms to any of its knowledge.
Oren or Kush, do you want to say more about the relationship between robustness and trustworthiness?
I just want to highlight again, I think this is obvious to the audience, and I see some questions coming up in the chat that are very tantalizing, but I won't address them until you tell us to. But I just want to highlight the fact that the profile of these errors is so different, right? So, and this is very much tied to this point about resilience, right? And this person who's done great work for you before, you tend to trust them again. An AI system that's done great work for you before is not any more trustworthy because of what's called the jagged edge, right? The very next question, or even a paraphrase of the same question, can yield a radically less good answer. So it's really important. We tend to anthropomorphize technology, all of us, even AI experts. And it's really important not to fall into that trap and not do that when it comes to these systems. So the heuristic I use is never trust an AI system. And we might get into some debate about that maybe down the road, which will be fun. But I firmly do not trust AI systems.
Yeah, and just one, since we're in this definitional part of the conversation, so another term that we hear a lot about is safety, and different people kind of define it differently. So I just wanted to kind of give my definition. So it is actually, I mean, like these sort of things, right? So it is this just general reliability for unexpected sort of harms that might come up, and doing well against like the expected ones as well. So kind of just that in my mind is what safety is, no matter what field we're talking about, but especially and including AI. So just wanted to throw that in there as well.
Okay. So now let's see how we got here, if these issues are new issues or not. So, Henry, when have these issues been raised first in the history of AI?
Right. Well, I think they came very early in the days of expert systems, and they came around the idea of understandability, that a user would not be able to trust a system that they could not understand. And so even though very early expert systems often had an explanation component that would try to give a summary of its reasoning, you can argue about how useful those summaries were. In terms of giving correct answers as opposed to just inspiring a sense of trust, I think we saw there the shift from purely rule-based systems that could have more catastrophic failure modes to Bayesian systems where the result would be, again, now more robust in the sense that you're going to get a probability distribution over answers. People may or may not like that, but at least you can come back and say, okay, and I can quantify um, uh, each of the, there's 5 different possible conclusions and leave it up to the user to pick between them.
Kush? Oren?
Yeah, no, I think that that was a great answer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but then Kush, so we looked at rule-based systems, deterministic, some of them probabilistic, and introducing some non-deterministic. But then, are these issues? Some part of these issues are they're specific to generative AI, so not even more traditional machine learning, but to generative AI, or were they also present in other kinds of AI systems? Because after all, even non-generative machine learning system can make mistakes. No, they always have an error rate, and so what issues related to factuality or trust are new or amplified by generative AI?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And let me, answer with the same sort of dimensions I mentioned earlier. So when I was saying kind of the basic competence or basic performance with traditional machine learning, as you said, they can have an error rate, right? So there's some ground truth that you're comparing to. But with the generative AI, I think it starts becoming more about what people call helpfulness, and then like kind of honesty or like the factuality as we've been talking about. So this helpfulness is like hard to characterize. There's no like precise ground truth to it, but maybe there's some like vibes or some other ways that you can kind of get a sense of, is this uh, generative AI LLM sort of thing being helpful or not. And then on the reliability side of things, yeah, you don't want there to be kind of harmfulness. So generating like all sorts of bad things, whether it's discussions of violence or hate speech or kind of like jailbreaking sort of things, or all sorts of things that can be harmful. So like, how do you have these things be harmless is then the main point there. And then on the explanation side of it, I think like before it was like truly like what was the reason that this model made its prediction. But with the generative AI, I think the more important question sometimes becomes, can you attribute the output? So what output tokens, like, where did they come from? Was it something in the prompt? Was it something in the original training data and the fine-tuning data, these sort of things? And on the selflessness side of it, I think it's much more about expressing values, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, like, can we actually align these things to human values or societal values and stuff? So it becomes quite much more, psychological in some sense, rather than like just a comparison of ground truth to outputs and so forth.
Okay.
I wanted
yeah,
to add
Oren,
some.
yes, I wanted to ask you because with generative AI, I think this tendency to anthropomorphize is amplified, right? Because
Yeah,
they write in our own language, right?
That's right. I think there's a lot to say here, and your question is very much on target. First of all, right, when we're doing something discriminative, we typically have a hypothesis and we say, okay, does this person have cancer or not? And we typically have well-calibrated confidence. So if the system says the person has cancer based on past performance, etc., as long as who's within distribution, we can say, okay, this answer is likely to be true with 85% confidence, et cetera, et cetera. In the generative case, right, this is very, very different. And I think one way to be very concise about that is to say that the systems are a lot more persuasive, right? They're generating some document or some text or some analysis. They're much more likely to be persuasive. We've struggled with well-calibrated confidence, right? So basically the system is always highly confident. And you see this when you interact with ChatGPT. And then you point out that it's completely incorrect, like it failed to count the number of R's in the word strawberry, and it said, "Oh, I'm sorry, but you're right." But it's remarkably confident. And then the last point has to do with the explanation, right? Part of the persuasiveness is they can give you a very persuasive explanation that can be completely wrong as well. So the net effect is that even though machine learning discriminative systems in the past were not 100% reliable, we are now in a completely different realm where basically, right, these systems are kind of demagogues. They will espouse something with great confidence, with excellent explanations, be very persuasive, and dead wrong.
Yeah, but also, don't you think that the fact that they are general purpose in a sense, so they are perceived as system that know everything about every topic, while with more traditional machine learning, you knew that it was built to answer certain questions about some specific topic, and so you knew that it was not to be trusted if you asked something completely different. So here you don't have that perception anymore. You actually feel that you can ask anything about any topic, and the system, as you say, responds with great confidence in any case, right? So that also adds to the perception of being trustworthy when maybe, you have to be careful. Henry, do you want to add anything to the new issues or amplified issues with generative AI?
No, I think people have actually touched on all the major points there.
Okay. So now let's try to understand whether we can at least assess this factuality or trustworthiness, even if we cannot mitigate it, but let's try to assess it. So let's start with Oren and with deepfakes. So deepfakes related to images, videos are at this point very, very realistic. But is there a reliable way to recognize whether an image or a video is fake, that is generated or modified by AI?
Right. So images, video, and audio here are kind of a different species of this unreliability, different than what we sometimes used to thinking about in AI, NLP, and so on. As you said, right, they're very persuasive. I studied this very closely in 2024 in the context of all these elections all over the globe. And even back then, there were a number of studies that we did, that other people did and published. There were quizzes published online, for example, by the New York Times, that showed that people are not better at detecting whether, say, a face or an image is fake. They're not better than flipping a coin. So basically, even though people think they can tell, they cannot. Since then, right, it's gotten worse in the sense this is a fast-moving field. A number of tools from Google, OpenAI, elsewhere have been released. And I want to mention that this has very, very important consequences, because this isn't just people going to an AI system and getting perhaps incorrect information. One very prominent case, and I'll just mention one, but there are many others, was the fake robocall of Joe Biden's voice in the New Hampshire primary, right, where people could not tell. I couldn't tell. It sounded just like him if you haven't heard it. And it was supposed to be a phone call, right? So it's imperfect acoustics. And you just couldn't tell that it wasn't Joe Biden calling you. I mean, not personally calling you, but a message from President Joe Biden. So it just shows you how this issue, right, proliferates and goes way beyond kind of access to sophisticated AI systems. It's basically this sort of deep fakes being propagated via social media and showing up literally on your phone or on your screen in a way that people cannot defeat.
So the answer would be no. You're saying there is no reliable way to recognize.
Yes, I'm sorry, I was getting carried away.
No, but
The
to
basic answer to
summarize,
your question,
what you said.
the answer is a resounding no.
But like few years ago, you were you had a system that succeeded in recognizing at least part of a picture as generated or modified by AI. Are those techniques not, not working anymore because of the new, more realistic capabilities of AI, or what's the problem?
Sure. So again, let me quickly tell the
Yeah,
story. So
yeah,
there are a lot of claims made in this field. And what I was referring to when I said is people cannot tell. So again,
yeah,
the studies
yeah,
that I was referring to were people looking at it and say, oh, I can tell this is fake or not, and they just cannot. Now, we built a very simple mixture of experts model that ran some of the best commercial systems, some of the best open source models, tuned to this, and then collected them together to make an assessment. We found that in certain cases in 2024, we were able to tell with high confidence. Not 100% sure by any means, but certainly much better than random by collecting all these tools, all these experts. We've not studied this in 2025, where there have been a lot of advances. So the trajectory of this is very negative for being able
yeah,
to tell, even using automated tools. So I can't give you a quantitative answer that's up to date, but the
yeah.
bottom line is that people can't tell, and the tools are getting worse and worse. And so we need different kinds of solutions. And people have looked to provenance, to digital watermarking. We can get into a lot of details there. But the bottom line is we're in bad shape when it comes to detecting deepfakes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anybody wants to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, just reiterating what Oren said, I think this is very much a cat and mouse game, and we're losing over time. So, yeah, I mean, there's been work in our lab also. I mean, Pinyu Chen and others have been developing these detectors, and I mean, NIST has been running, I mean, all sorts of competitions and programs and so forth. But yeah, I mean, you're successful at one point in time, but then you wait a couple months, and there's a big question: is that going to stick around or not?
Okay. So, so let's go to LLMs rather than image or video sound generators. So, Henry, so trustworthiness applied to the content generated by LLM includes also the ability to recognize if a piece of text is generated by AI. So, in this case, the trust is on the AI system, but also on its users. And this is what happens, for example, when authors or reviewers, as you know very well, of AI research papers that generate papers and generate reviews using AI, or even students that write their essays with AI. So is it possible in some way to recognize if a text has been generated by an LLM? Are there tools that we can use to
Well,
do that?
there are tools, but unfortunately, they're becoming less and less effective. So uh, there certainly are a wide variety of open source and commercial tools that you put in an essay, and on a lengthy piece of text, it'll try various heuristics, even use other LLMs to try to guess whether it's likely to be LLM generated or not. Of course, the cases you read about in the news are where a human wrote it and it said it was LLM. Um, I assume a lot of the cheating, when students cheat, it's so blatant that it's probably the tool is not nearly as useful as simply recognizing, the student who is failing out of the class in other ways couldn't possibly have written this. I think the problem though is becoming worse, partly because as LLMs become more fluent writers, we know there's a real crisis in education, and students are becoming less fluent writers, and they're going through. I remember in high school, sweating over essays about Shakespeare. Writing a 10-page essay about Shakespeare and revise and revise. And if you've never done that in your life, uh, uh, you're just going to be a terrible writer probably, and not be able to express yourself clearly. Um, and so then what are you going to be comparing the AI against? And I guess maybe perhaps the best we can hope for in the future is uh, AI assisted writing, so that you can make sure at least the students have some input. But certainly, I know at the university, a lot of professors are moving to things like written exams, essay-based written exams in the classroom, where there's no electronics and they have to hand write. And of course, that's hard to do if you have hundreds of students. Students hate it. It's not easy to grade all those essays, but and I think universities probably don't like necessarily discovering that they just admitted a bunch of students who are illiterate.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course the impact goes beyond not being able to be a good writer, no, but not being able to articulate well your thoughts in your head, and then to discuss with others, to compare, to compromise. So it really goes beyond the ability to write a good essay if
Right.
you bypass it by asking, an LLM. Yeah.
And I guess the one point, though, that people also worry about LLMs make it easier to generate disinformation. And I'm less worried about that because it seems pretty easy to get these sweatshops full of people to write disinformation. That organized crime gangs and hostile governments are doing that already. So I guess LLMs could make that worse, but I almost feel like that's a different problem.
Well, right, but I do want to highlight that, of course, you're right, Henry, right? People have been good at generating disinformation and lying even before this, and now you have the sweatshops. But LLMs do allow bad actors to do this at an unprecedented scale. So think about, for example, phishing attacks. Imagine that every single voter in America gets a highly personalized series of emails, right? Trying to persuade them to take a particular form of action, right? So that's not something you can do with a sweatshop. And unfortunately, that's something you can do with these AI systems. So we do have the potential, this hasn't happened, to have kind of unprecedented attacks. One other thing, and I don't want to get into education because there's so much to say there, but I do want to put a nail in the coffin of these LLM-based tools to detect LLM writing. And I'll make a confession, even though I consider myself to be a decent writer, I now use LLMs in my writing all the time. And the first thing I do after I use the LLM is I give it to the LLM and say, does this sound like an LLM? And why? And it often actually gives me subtle clues in the writing where it says, oh, yeah, this aspect of it does sound like an LLM wrote it, right? And I say, great, fix it. So after a little, I guess I'm a little bit more sophisticated than a seventh grader, the night before the exam, but probably they're plenty sophisticated too. So after a little round of write it, detect it, fix it, rewrite it, nobody can tell. And then I also have the audacity to make a few edits myself because I do comment my writing, and it's just a mixed thing that nobody can tell what Oren wrote and what the LLM wrote.
And one thing we probably should add is there certainly are techniques where a company that provides an LLM can make that LLM such that you can detect its writing using these statistical watermarking techniques. So the text seems just as fluent, but there are these mathematical clues embedded in terms of the distribution of certain letters and certain words. Mm-hmm. And one can imagine regulations, calling for that. But the problem, of course, then could be is that there'll be the unregulated LLMs running, on the .ru domains that people will use instead.
Yeah.
Kush, do you want to
Yeah.
add?
Yeah. So one thing I just wanted to add, that builds on what Oren was saying. I mean, in terms of his own process, right? So, I mean, I assume he's not doing this in any malicious, I mean, sort of way. It's just, I mean, part of his process now, right? And so, I mean, thinking of the good actors that want to do the right thing and be transparent about it and so forth. So, we've actually created this AI attribution sort of mark that is not just yes or no, like did you or did you not use an AI to generate any text in this, but it's very fine-grained. So which of the two, the human or the AI, took the initiative? Did the human review it? Was it used just for polishing the grammar? Was it used for generating like large sections? I mean, all of those things. And then we kind of have this thing very much like a Creative Commons license. So it'll specify exactly like all the details of what you did. And so then you can attach it to your writing, to your publications, whatever it is. And it can be a tool to help people be more honest about what they've done.
Or transparency about the
Mhm.
attribution, right?
Exactly, exactly.
So, Kush, there are a lot of benchmarks to evaluate factuality or trustworthiness of an AI system. So, can you help us understand what
Mhm.
these benchmarks are actually evaluating? If there is a general benchmark, or one needs to use several of them to evaluate specific properties, and if so, then does it make sense to combine them into one
Mhm.
single score for trustworthiness? So,
Yeah.
guide us through the space of these benchmarks.
Sure. So, I mean, as we've already gone through this conversation, we've talked about, I mean, all sorts of different dimensions of trustworthiness, of even on the factuality side of hallucination side of it. I mean, there's kind of factuality with respect to a kind of world knowledge, or it could be that you train the model only on books that say that the Earth is the center of the universe, and then if it says that, then that isn't really hallucination or whatever. But I mean, long outputs and the factuality in those versus short outputs. I mean, there's all sorts of things that could be going on, and there's different benchmarks, different data sets that are out there. The basic way it works is just, I mean, you have some prompts or some inputs and some expected outputs, and then you see does the LLM match those or not. And uh, for example, there's this thing called the AgriFact benchmark collection. It's like 11 different characterizations and so forth. And like all of these just build up. I mean, that's just on hallucination. Then on hate speech, on this, on this, on this. You keep putting it together, and you get these large collections of things. They might even take a very long time to run, which is a bit crazy, but you can do some sort of model risk evaluation. There's even like one of the IBM products called What's Next Our Governance. I mean, we'll do this for you. There's other open source things. There's Helm from Stanford, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, that's just like one indicator. But you really need to see how these things are used in real life in like practical use cases with like very specific sort of needs that a given user might have, and that's not the way benchmarking is. It's not benchmarking is not going to reveal that, right? So
Yeah.
it's something, but it's not the whole story.
Henry and Oren, do you want to say more about benchmarking? But this takes us to the next question, which is the contextuality of trust, no? Because also in our community survey, some respondents said that trustworthiness is contextual, since it depends on the domain and the objectives that you have in using an AI system in that specific scenario. So does it mean that an AI system cannot be trusted in general, but its trustworthiness should be only evaluated when we know when and how it's going to be used? What do you think, Oren?
I'm not sure that I have something worthwhile to say on this topic that's not obvious, because obviously, right, everything is contextual. I do want to take this opportunity just to mention some really interesting research that's related, not exactly on target, but I hope you'll humor me, won the Best Paper Award in NeurIPS just recently, right, 2025, on a benchmark where they took open-ended questions, questions like, what do you think about abortion, right? Where, of course, the answer is contextualized by so many things, right? What does a liberal think? What does a conservative think? What do you think about first term? Blah, blah, blah. But the thing that's really interesting there, which is a related point, is the homogenization. So it turned out, surprisingly perhaps, that whereas human responses on a question like this are incredibly diverse, right? You say like two people, three opinions. The responses across model and, of course, within model were remarkably homogeneous, which is in its own way, right, non-trustworthy, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a regression to the mean of a certain sort, mean opinion. So I think it's just important to understand just how unreal and optimize the mathematical function, what you're getting is. It seems like a genuine opinion. What it is right, very much stochastic parrot, to use that phrase.
Anybody wants to add to that? The homogeneity of the behavior of these systems, or the content that's generated.
Well, I just say that that is it's one of those insights that's really important that in retrospect we say, oh yeah, of course, because it's based on merging so many human models into one, and particularly and then after that you have this post training, and most of the systems are all doing the same post training. I'd be curious. I have to go read this paper now to see if they also tested Grok to see if you take a lot of the guide rails off, do you get some more diversity in responses?
But would
You,
fine-tuning
you
or
just get what Elon Musk thinks, right? It's tuned to. Sorry, sorry, Francesca. Please go ahead.
that's fine. No, I was saying that, but isn't fine-tuning or these post-training techniques, aren't they able to contextualize, a bit what the LLM is going to say for the specific task or the specific company or the specific community? So
Yeah,
doesn't that help?
I'm not so sure about that, right? Because a lot of the reinforcement learning from human feedback, which is the basis of a lot of this post-training, the humans are not expressing their own views. They're expressing what they're told to express. They're given like a bunch of guidelines from the company that hired them, or the multiple layers of companies that hired them eventually. But if they don't follow that, they don't get paid, right? And so it's not their humanness that's coming through. It's just them as some like other kind of computer, really, at the end of the day, and it's expressing the policies or the values or the desires of the company that hired them. So I don't think it actually happens in the way that you're saying.
Okay, so let's go to now the topic of value alignment, which is related and very linked to trustworthiness, because in some sense I tend to trust more systems or people that I know they have values aligned to me. But how can we be aware of the values that an AI system operates with, and to check if they're aligned with ours, and what does it mean exactly to be aligned with human values?
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what Oren was just saying, right? I mean, that paper, I haven't read it either, but presumably it's putting in these different kinds of prompts with different kinds of potential responses based on the underlying values that would mediate those responses, and that's clearly, I mean, a way to do it. But I think there's kind of a need to go even beyond that, because like Look, if I'm a member of some community with some values, like, first of all, how do you even define what the bounding box of that community is in which there should be some homogeneity of values? And I think that's an open question. So, like, I mean, we can talk about all these different sort of like groupings, like the conservative liberal or anything, but maybe it's that apple farmers in upstate New York have a very specific sort of value judgment on a particular type of query or response or whatever, right? So, like, I mean, how do we get to that point is a question. And then like oftentimes a person doesn't even know their values, right? I mean, on most things, like I don't know what I think. I mean, I've never even thought about it. So, like just expecting people to be able to probe models to uh, in the way that reveals their biases is a bit, I mean, too much sometimes. So, I think more like ethnographic sort of approaches let people use these things in the context that they want to use them to try to satisfy their needs and have an outside observer kind of see where it's falling short might be a way to go.
Okay. Any other thoughts about value alignment? So now let's go to, now first we said the definition, the history, then the assessment or testing. But now can we be a little bit more proactive? So how can we mitigate the lack of factuality and trustworthiness? So I ask Oren again, but I think that in your previous answer, there was already the answer to this. So are there methods to improve the factuality of an image, a video, or sound, and so on? But if we can't even assess, then how can we improve it? Is there some solution or preliminary, whatever, thoughts of a solution?
Let me answer this question in the context of video, image type of content, etc., because these are kind of different species. I've, for quite a while now, certainly since the article I wrote back in 2019, advocated that we need to make more use of authentication and digital signatures. So these technologies already exist, and we can use them to sign and in that way authenticate, right, where this comes from. This really is a CNN video. This really is, Oren Etzioni playing with his kids or what have you. The problem here, interestingly, is not a technology problem and not an AI problem, but I think an adoption and user interface problem. I don't think it's a regulation problem either, because I don't think we can regulate our way to this. And as Henry pointed out, right, people can always use tools that don't do this, right? So if we regulate that, say OpenAI signs everything as they already do, right, generated by Sora, that's not what's going to help us. Where I think we need is people need to be educated about the fact that if you see something on your favorite social media network or YouTube, what have you, and it's not signed, then there is no basis for knowing that it's real.
Yeah.
And the problem is that we don't have that mindset today, and there's a big question of how do we fix it. But I think that is the direction, as opposed to building increasingly sophisticated detection tools, etc.
Okay, but then I have a naive follow-up question, which is, are these digital signature robust? I mean, can't I fake a digital signature or remove a digital signature and put another one? So are they robust?
It's not a naive question at all, and it has two pieces. The first one is that the signatures, these are cryptographic protocols. They really are robust. Again, modular quantum computing and things like that. So when it's signed, you can rely on it. When it's not signed, right, there's a funny thing. It could still be genuine, even if it's not signed.
Yeah.
But if it is signed, you can rely on it. So you can, if you insist, and again, maybe it's the tools, right? Your browser, your app that you're using needs to insist on things being signed. And if they're not signed, there should at least be a very broad articulation. Hey, this is unsigned content. then I think we could be in good shape. Unfortunately, that's not how things are playing out right now.
Yeah.
But how would you sign a fully human-generated piece of work, right? Like that, I mean, you can sign the fully AI-generated thing, but isn't it more important to maybe prove that, yes, this was fully done by me?
Yeah, well, you would sign it. Let me give a very concrete example that illustrates how this is today. Today we get emails all the time, right? We exchanged some emails before this panel, and we assumed that those emails were in fact generated by the people that said, but they're really easy to spoof. Somebody could have easily inserted an incorrect email. It's also really easy to turn on digital signatures. We just don't bother. So, Kush, the emails that I got from you were unverified, and I'm sorry to say I trusted them. Not because you're obviously a trustworthy person, but because I really shouldn't have. What I should have done is insisted that you digitally sign your email, which you can easily do, but none of us bother. So this is the situation. We can easily trust human-generated content if we just took a few extra steps. Those are not turned on by default, which I think is a problem.
Okay.
Excellent.
So, Henry, let's go on a different topic here, because now many AI systems are given human-like personalities. So, is this something that goes in the direction of improving trustworthiness or not? In our community survey, only 24% of the respondents agree that this is a good direction in terms of improving trustworthiness. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think a lot of us are kind of freaked out at that idea of some sense of tricking people. Oren wrote an op-ed years ago talking about how AI systems need to tell everybody up front, oh, I'm an AI system, I'm not a human. So I think that it's coming, having more of these human personalities. A certain percentage of users will trust such systems more readily. Others will be more skeptical, and there's certainly like an uncanny valley approach where if you take your AI system and you put it in something that is clearly not human, like a picture of an animated teddy bear or something, that comes off as being okay, that I can now trust my teddy friend, where a human would be kind of off-putting. But I think we're rapidly crossing that uncanny valley. So I don't think it does anything to help. It helps people trust the systems, create this emotional sense of trust. But we're already really good at doing that. We don't need any more encouragement.
Okay, so for the sake of time, let's go to another question, which is for Kush, but also for everybody else, that about the techniques that are being used to mitigate these issues with factuality and trustworthiness, such as fine-tuning, reinforcement learning, RAG, use of external tools, chain of thought, and many more. So, are these tools, are these techniques effective to verify? There is also a question in the chat about the relationship between trustworthiness and verifiability. So, can, for example, LLMs themselves, like Oren did, generate but also verify and check that what was generated is true? So, because many of our survey respondents mentioned a lot of techniques for mitigating these issues, like new neural net architecture, but also external fact-checking tools. Nobody mentioned, because maybe we didn't give the option, about using LLMs themselves, to do like LLM as a judge, to judge and verify the trustworthiness of others. So what can you tell us about this topic?
Yeah, I mean, there are tools, I mean, the whole list that you went through, those are certainly things that one can use, but none of this is perfect, right? And just taking the chain of thought as an example, that, I mean, is like you just ask the LLM, tell me how you got to the answer, right? And it tells you something, but that itself can also be hallucinated. So we can't really rely on it. RAG, you gave us another example. I mean, what this is it's doing a search first, getting some small number of documents, and then using an LLM to kind of summarize that or extract an answer from it. And there's still the LLM in the middle, right? I mean, even if you narrow down the search space or the content sources or whatever, the LLM still can hallucinate. So maybe you'll do better, but I mean, not perfect. So I think there is a need for things outside of the model itself. So yeah, I mean, one thing we've been developing is this model called the Granite Guardian, which is able to do some level of hallucination detection, some level of harm detection, and so forth, like after the fact or on the inputs and so forth. But even that isn't enough, right? I mean, so you can kind of go even deeper. I mean, do some kind of external searches for factual stuff, and then do some probabilistic inference based on what you get back with the response, and try to even do more with that. So something we call the fact reasoner. But at the end of the day, nothing is perfect, and I think we need to keep working on things, keep making progress.
Okay. And Henry, something to follow up what Kush said, because LLMs are increasingly be used within the so-called agentic AI systems, no, that include LLMs, but also include other components that by their nature, they're more trustworthy and factual, like traditional databases, symbolic reasoning systems, and so on. Is this a way to increase the trustworthiness of the overall system, even if it includes LLMs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've really seen remarkable progress in just the last few months with LLMs augmented with tools to improve their trustworthiness or their factuality in specific ways. So, for example, when you're using ChatGPT, you can, if you're a paid user, you can go in and select create a GPT for me, and then you specify some additional parameters, such as I wanted to rely upon a scientific scholarship database. I don't remember which one it uses. And that pretty much eliminates hallucinated citations. It still might have other kinds of hallucinations, but boy, when you're doing your reference review and you're trying to track down your citations, that's an enormous help. And I think then when we see software AI systems, for example, used in software development, we're starting to see some integration of tools for type inference and simple kinds of program verification that are improving quality, less sort of hallucinated code. So we definitely are making good progress.
Yeah, Kush and Oren, about the relationship of agentic AI approach to address trustworthiness issues.
Yeah, I mean, there's starting to be this phrase going around called guardian agents. So kind of like good guys that are trying to find all of the bad stuff, kind of like antibodies and so forth. But yeah, who knows? We'll see.
So I want to make two points. One is I do think, as Henry said, and I actually hadn't tried that capability, so it's interesting to get your assessment. I do think this is work in progress that's getting increasingly improved, right, as in practical terms. It is interesting to pose a more theoretical question, which is how do we build a notion of factuality into the system? It's just a pragmatic matter of tuning it and designing architectures with multiple kind of critics and so on, or is there a way to build in the notion of a fact into the loss function or into the system in a more robust way where you could get a guarantee, right? I don't think Henry is claiming that you actually have a guarantee. Just as a practical matter, it's working. That's one thing. The second thing is this problem in a funny way continues to expand. So a lot of the work that I've been doing in 2025 is going back to the old notion that Henry and I remember, maybe others too, of softbots and agents and so on. And now using this technology, we're building agents. Now the problem of trustworthiness is, do you trust your agent to operate on your desktop? Do you trust your agent to send an email? Do you trust your agent to use your credit card? So in a funny way, right, this problem, even as we're resolving the hallucination problem, is actually expanding, right? Trustworthy AI no longer means, do you trust the kind of inert document that it generated? It's, do you trust it to drive your car? Do you trust it to use your credit card?
Yeah, to act in the real world,
Exactly.
as delegation. Okay, so I think we are already out of time, but let's do one last round for everybody. So, and the general question is, are we optimistic or not? So will we be able to have factual and trustworthy AI systems soon? 60% of our respondents said that they don't think so. I would like to get your opinion. And if you think we will be able to do it, will we do it just with technical solutions, or we need also socio-technical ones, including, as we mentioned, people awareness, training, and different frame of mind? So let's start with Henry.
Yeah, so I guess I'd say I'm optimistic. I think that within 2 years, maybe less, we'll really have the factuality problem solved, and for most uses, they'll be pretty darn trustworthy, and so that's so
Okay.
on the pro side.
Okay, good. Oren.
Well, I feel like our panel has been woefully devoid of controversy, so I will end on a note of
Finish with
controversy
the
in particular.
controversy.
I'm quite pessimistic, and I think that the fundamental problems. I do agree with Henry that we're going to make excellent technical progress, but I think the fundamental problem is a socio-technical problem, and we're really struggling with those as a society.
But would you say, Oren, that factuality is more of a technical problem and trustworthiness includes more of socio-technical things?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. Absolutely.
Okay. Kush?
Let me not even answer the question to end on that note. I'll say that maybe like asking for trustworthiness is maybe the wrong question, because I mean, circling back to what Henry said at the very beginning, I mean, eventually it's a trust question, not a trustworthiness question, and trust involves vulnerability, and a lot of the people that are now going to be onboarded into using these AI systems are already vulnerable themselves for various reasons. They're in terms of their socioeconomic status or other marginalized reasons and so forth. And so asking them to trust something when they're already vulnerable is very problematic. So actually, I will answer the question. So it is socio-technical, and it's really a question of kind of doing things beyond just the AI, beyond the technology, and kind of making people less vulnerable in other ways so that the AI can then become trusted in their lives.
Okay, thank you. Well, I mean, not really controversy, but three different angles to this question. So let me thank at this point the panelists for a very insightful discussion that I hope shed some light or given everybody some food for thought on AI, factuality, and trustworthiness. Thanks also to all of the people who listened to this and watched this panel for joining us. The panel has been recorded. The recording will be available soon on the AAAI website for the report on the future of AI research, where you can also find already the previous file panels, and on the AAAI YouTube channel. So I'll see you all soon for another interesting discussion on AI. Bye-bye. Thank you.